Hey, Owen, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
How are you?
I'm good, Philip, and how are you?
I am fine, thank you very much.
Mm.
Thanks for agreeing to join this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just I'm busy recording, and I can edit it later a little bit, shorten the introduction and what. And I'm
Oh.
also busy live streaming to Facebook. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure how it's going to appear, or even if it's appearing on Facebook, but let's hope for the best.
Yes, yes.
So let me just explain a little bit about how we're going to run this. We're going to basically it's an informal discussion or a conversation
Mm-hmm.
between me and you. If there's
Mm-hmm.
people later on that join in on the Zoom meeting, they are
Mm-hmm.
welcome, and they can also ask questions if they want.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we're just going to talk a little bit about yourself as an activist, and then a little bit about the issues and how the issues are being dealt with by communities in the area that's dealing with these issues, that's being affected by these issues. And then we can talk a little bit about potential solutions. But it's very informal.
Sure.
Yeah. But first, how are you? How's things there in the Eastern Cape?
Um, Philip, uh, but I must say, would in terms of trying to address those challenges, there are challenges as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, but as things stands currently, as the network, we are busy because of the oil drilling by Shell.
Yeah.
We are also busy trying to engage the issue at port of Ngqura, the cat power ship.
I saw
Uh,
that you have an action tomorrow, eh?
yes, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah, we
And
can.
we've just been informed currently in the Wild Coast uh, that there is a development along the sea that seeks to threaten nature as well.
Yeah.
We've just registered there as interested party and affected party. So we'll see how things go.
Okay. Okay. Owen, let me just say again, thanks a lot for participating. I don't know if you saw on the Geosphere YouTube channel, I think you are the 11th person that we're having this kind of conversation with along the
Yeah.
same format. And the idea
Mhm.
is then to sort of compile a synopsis of all of these interactions and, to see if there's which are the main issues being faced, how are people dealing with it, which are the stumbling blocks, the threats, and which are the opportunities. But first,
Yeah.
I would like to take this opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. And if you don't mind, just telling us where you were born, where you grew up, and I'd like to ultimately, find out why you became an activist. What inspired you? What motivated you to become involved in environmental issues?
Okay, Philip, I'm getting you. Uh, Firstly, my name is Sibusiso Owen Ndidi. I was born in the city of gold, but because of my parents were involved in a struggle, then they had to take me back to their original home, which is the Eastern Cape. So I was then taken to a train a 2-day journey to land in East London. So that's where I am. That is why I'm in the Eastern Cape currently.
How old were you when you came to East London? And if you don't mind, how were your parents involved in the struggle?
My mother was working she was a domestic worker, and my dad he was an artist, a singer. I don't know if you would know a group called Amaswazemvelo. He originates from Swaziland, but now they moved to Mpumalanga.
Okay.
So around about at the age of 12, that's when I was moved from Johannesburg to here because my mother couldn't stay in one place. So he thought that I must go and join my grandmother who was residing in East London then. So I took a bus to Whittlesea, a village called, Whittlesea, Ekomani. So that is where we are based currently. And joining the environmental struggle, it started in 1999 when I met a colleague we have moved now to UK. His name is Mark Wayne. Met him on a plane. I was attending then a consultative meeting by the Department of Environmental Affairs because one of the reasons that I was invited there, I was challenging the issues of waste management in my area there. So the municipality thought, okay, I must form part of the delegation going to that meeting so that we work on policy issues. So getting in that space, I learned a lot that the environment needs to be taken care of. I've joined an organization then called ECEN, and I became a representative of the Eastern Cape EJNF, sitting in the steering committee of the Eastern Cape. Things went on and on. I've attended the World on Sustainable Development on behalf of EJNF, representing the people of the Eastern Cape. It grew on and on. When EJNF closed its doors in 2004, myself and a colleague that you know very well called Tabang, we sat down and see what can we do in the absence of EJNF. Then Tabang said to me, look, I'm in Cape Town, we're in the Eastern Cape, but let's communicate, let's see how do we move forward with the agenda of the injustices around the environment. So I proposed the name Eastern Cape Environmental Justice Network. Then we developed documents to structure the network. That's where the network started. Ever since then, the network has been involved in a number of activities involving waste management, involving energy, involving agriculture, involving, as you know, timber plantations through Timber Watch. That's when there was a problem in Statarem, then I make some research. Then that's when I found Wali through WESA. So we developed that relationship. So Eastern Cape Environmental Network since 2004 has been there and has been working with various communities across the regions of the province, trying to attend to the issues of the environment. I would say in your language, F matters. So as of now, currently, we're faced, as I said and indicated to you, that we are faced with the challenge of energy that is being proposed in the coast. Now they are proposing to have to do oil drilling from Mossel Bay to the east to Western Cape, and Port St. John's, which is the Wild Coast. Operation Pakisa is also taking place in that part. The problem in fact, the challenge that we're facing is that all these projects that I've mentioned to you, including the Cat Powership project that is happening in Kucha, in PE now, Ngqeberha,
Yeah.
is the public participation process of that. You will remember, you will have around the coast, you will have informal fishermen, people who are making their livelihood on sea. You will having traditional leaders that are using sea as well, and of which, as the network, we feel that those people should be consulted if there is any development that's to take place in that space. So a number of these communities then are contacting us to assist in terms of how to move forward, because they felt that they are not being consulted in the process. So we've been submitting on their behalf. But Philip, ever since, for instance, the oil and gas drilling, the public participation processes in terms of the environmental impact assessment started around June last year.
Yeah.
And we had a problem with the process itself, because they are using the platform that we're using currently, which is Zoom and all that. Taking into account a fisherman who does not have a smartphone, how does one access that? You would know that many, in terms of the stats, many people in the province are not employed. So these platforms of the visual meetings does not work for them. So you will need to coordinate them, traditionally call them into meetings. We
Yeah.
took into cognizance their excuse of saying they were COVID-19 regulations which prohibit people to meet to meet physically. That was their excuse to say. Then we said to them, look, then if that is a problem, why can't you wait then up until the levels came down to the extent that gatherings will be allowed, so that even those people who cannot afford data, who does not have smartphones, can be able then to participate here, because they are the affected parties. But in all these projects that I've mentioned to you, they have been proceeding without that, but we're constantly engaging with them via telephone, via emails, and they are not responding and they are not coming to the fore. And one of the things that we were currently doing as well with our partners, which I would not mention currently here, we have noticed that all these projects are being facilitated, or the consulting company, it's the same. And we find it very unusual, because in Richards Bay, they are also given a task to facilitate the environmental impact assessment. In the Eastern Cape here, in Kucha, they have been also given a task to facilitate this EIA process. You go to Saldanha Bay as well. This is the same company who's doing, and in all these areas, the attitude towards the have-nots is the same. So we have just formed partners with an organization called Green Connections, which also works on this space, but primarily in the Western Cape. However, they also work in the Eastern Cape here and there. As of as tomorrow we're having a function also, we've invited them to form part of the protest, because we believe that many hands would assist us going forward, not only the Eastern Cape Environmental Network, because once you become, once you broaden the struggle, at least things, the weight will be not as much it will be if it was one organization.
Yeah.
So as of now, things, that's how things are. I would say.
I want to talk about the oil and gas drilling off the Eastern Cape, or explorations. But before I get there, I'm just want to talk a little bit about the Environmental Justice Networking Forum that you were involved with.
Okay. Okay.
How is that organization is not functional anymore, or is it? I mean, in a way, The Eastern Cape Environmental Network is a product of the Environmental Justice Networking Forum. Am I right?
100% correct.
Okay. So, but the Environmental Justice Networking Forum, as it used to exist, is not around anymore. I mean, it doesn't have branches in each province, etc., etc.
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay. And you as in your capacity as representing the Eastern Cape Environmental Network, you're also involved in the South African Water Caucus. Am I right? You are on the Water Caucus. You are a member of the Water Caucus.
Yes. There
Of
is no
course.
way, Philip, we can leave that space, taking into account currently where I am. I'm talking to you while I'm in PE, but the new name is Nabeha now. In this area, they are facing day zero, and we've been asked even where we stay to use water sparingly. So there is no way that this province, taking its history in terms of water scarcity, that the Eastern Cape Environmental Network would not be part of the Eastern Cape Water Caucus. So the Eastern Cape Caucus is also in alliance with the Eastern Cape Environmental Network. That's correct.
Yeah. I must say that as a network organization, the Water Caucus has always been a kind of inspiring just for being there, for being there as a network and persisting through, what is it,
Yeah.
almost or more than 20 years now that the Water Caucus.
Yeah.
And I think a part of the reason for its success is the way that it is so loosely structured. I mean,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
it's a loose network, but it's a strangely very efficient network. No, I think it's incredibly valuable, especially in a province like the Eastern Cape, where one could say that there is still a fair amount of semi-wilderness areas,
Yes.
a fair amount of environmental integrity, a beautiful coastline, and
Yes.
and I suppose an abundant amount of culture and traditional indigenous knowledge systems, which is something that we're becoming more and more dependent upon. So the Eastern Cape, I mean, it's always been kind of, if you want to go to the wild coast, because it is wild, it is still beautiful, and it is unspoiled in many places. But of course, now there are many threats. Um, you spoke a little bit about the oil and the gas, which we'll get deeper into now. Then you also mentioned the timber plantations, which I will also, especially in relation to consumption of water, and then just general mining in that area, which is that's mining and industrial timber plantations. Of course, those are the issues that we struggle with here in Mpumalanga. I think those are the kind of primary issues. And of course, there's industrial agriculture as well, massive expansion of, for example, macadamia orchards. So it's farming because you're farming trees, but unfortunately, it is a product that's just or primarily for export purposes. So it is not really like, when you think of a farm and you think of supplying food for the nation, it's not like that. It's more like just an agri business. It makes sense to plant macadamia trees. But let's get back to the gas exploration. First, can you give us a little bit of a picture as to what the situation is now? I know that there's gas fields off Mossel Bay that's been operating for some time. What are the impacts and what are the benefits that those gas fields there and the gas exploitation of those gas reserves, what benefits have come to the people of that region?
Seemingly none, as we were engaging people in that part of the world. And as we speak currently, We know for a fact, it was on the news on the SABC at some time last year, that where, firstly, in Mossel Bay, that's where Petro SA is. And there were a number of employees which were retrenched towards the launch of gas shell, which is the exploration last year.
Yeah.
And these workers have been very informative when we engage them, giving us information that the company has not been transparent enough to share with them in terms of these projects. But also, Philip, as I indicated previously, that we have not been given an opportunity to engage the process itself. You would know that the environmental impact assessment will give communities a space to know ins and out of the project. So that if they don't want the project to say, they don't want the project. If they want the project, they would say they do want the project. However, if they are concerned, there must be a balance equation there. So the issue, as we're sitting here, is that both Petro SA, Shell, and the appointed firm, consulting firm, has not come to the fore, giving communities details about the project. And we know for a fact the ship was there, I think, around about September last year, doing exploration regarding of the submissions that we did. And we know for a fact that they have managed to find gas in that space. And that is why our minister is saying that now the coastline is rich. Johannesburg should not be seen as a gold city. The focus should shift now on the coastlines, particularly Western Cape and the Eastern Cape. In fact, even the KwaZulu-Natal, Uguti, those are the gold cities because they have found gas in that space. But not much information from them has been coming to the fore. The only information we have is the information that we've managed to do our own research in our private forces, just to know exactly what are the ins and outs of those, and learning as well from other countries what these companies has been doing. You will know that the question of oil and gas and drilling is not only here in South Africa, Botswana, our brothers Mozambique, in Namibia, currently in Obangwa, are also facing the same issue. So I think the SADC region is faced with the same struggle that we're faced with, and that is why we've been calling, suggesting as the Eastern Cape Environmental Network, a summit of these four countries just to sit down and strategize how do we move forward in terms of advancing this struggle of poor communities, and how do we begin to attend, try to take our governments, even the multinational companies, to come to us and explain so that we can voice our view based on the research that we have.
And tell me the research that you have, or the interactions that you have with the people affected by these gas and potential gas exploration and exploitation. What's the main the main issues? Is it that people are
The
not
main issue,
yeah?
the main issue, Philip, is when you're exploring, you don't know where the mineral is. You are just exploring, trying to find the minerals. In that process, you are drilling as well to find gas. You are leaving holes in the process. Then what happens to people whose livelihood is at sea? Your fishermen, for example. The story that were told by fishermen in Mossel Bay, the story that were told by fishermen in Port St. John's are the same. They are same. ever since there are these ship on the ocean doing the exploration, they will spend 5 days to 10 days not catching any fish. And the scientists are quantifying that to say because of once they're exploring, they are drilling and there is vibration. So the aqua life move from that particular area. So that is why they cannot be able to get fish where they used to. So that's one. The other thing is it's for it's been raised by traditional leaders as well that they cannot use the sea. I think that was in Portland zones where a traditional leader said at some point when they were doing their ceremony on the sea, they have noticed could there is an oil spill. And they were also in the newspaper, in our local newspaper called Del Dispatch, there were a lot of fishes was washed out of the sea and they were dead. And the traces is that there was oil spill as well. So the research that we're doing, it's based on what the communities nearby these coastlines are facing. So that is why it remains paramount important for us to engage this process. And if we need to seek balance between livelihood and profit, we need to do that because we believe that needs to be done.
Yeah, that is just also always the difficult issue now, is to find that balance between, you know, because there's always a certain amount of environmental exploitation
Yeah,
by people, you know. But
yeah.
it seems as if at the moment it's just going crazy, and it's having such a detrimental impact on the natural environment that it's because that's what ultimately we all depend upon, like those fisher folk on the coast that are dependent on the fishes, you know,
Mhm.
for their livelihoods. We are
Mm.
all dependent on nature, and if we mess with it too much, it's not going to be able to provide us with those essential services that we require, you know. And then we're going to wish that we didn't mess with the earth that much. Um, but you know, gas to me also, I mean, it's this whole issue of energy, and there's of course we have massive carbon emissions with our coal-fired power stations. Um, it would be good if that can change, you know. But to me, it is not as if gas is a cleaner option. It's a slightly cleaner option, maybe slightly less emissions, but than coal. But it's still a fossil fuel that will be exploited, and that will be that ultimately is finite. You know, we cannot keep on using that resource, so it's almost like a crutch, and we need to look for something that's more sustainable. And I'm interested in this kind of renewable energy, you know, debate as we all are. And I've, you know, looked at solar power, and of course, it is handy to be able to use the sun for the abundant energy source that it is. But at the moment, it's not that easy, and definitely not that cheap to put up a solar power system that is adequate. You know, similar with wind. I mean, those magnets that they require inside those wind generators, they are dependent on rare earth minerals, which are rare, you know, and which of course then requires mining. So it seems as if these solar and wind energy options also in a way are completely uh, 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 dependent on resource extraction and mining, you know. Even electric cars, you know, when you think of the batteries that they house, and you think of uh, 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 um, the energy that they require in the first place. I mean, I'm sure most of them are being charged by the grid, you know, and most of that grid power is still from coal in most places. And of course, the other big threat is this renewable energy in terms of biomass burning. You know, where you burn wood and you say that is a clean or renewable energy because the trees, they grow again. But then, as you know, they would plant timber plantations, and these timber plantations that they use for biomass is even worse than the timber plantations that we know, because the trees are planted closer together. It's a faster rotation, you know, shorter rotation periods. It's even more of an industrial process, and then most of that resource is probably exported to fulfill energy requirements of energy hungry nations in the north. But I mean, it remains a problem. How do we power future generations? You know, because I do not think that solar power or wind power even is the long-term answer. Maybe also in your answer to that, you can just reflect on these ships these power supply ships that I read about. Um, that I think it's from a Turkish company, that they have these.
Yeah, that's quite
Yeah.
powerful.
Can you inform us a little bit about that? What is I mean, I understand it's some ship that can create power by either using natural gas or diesel or crude oil, um, and then be able to produce energy basically anywhere along the coast.
Yeah, yeah, it's exactly that. It's exactly that. But the concern, it's in the process, you know. And one is the question of noise. Secondly, in relation to the aqua life. Secondly, is the use of. In fact, the concern is the use of the diesel in the sea.
Yeah.
And so you are right. That's how it works. They're using a big pipe to pipe that gas out. Again, I think another concern that we have, who's going to benefit from this gas. And a lot has been said, this gas is going to other countries other than South Africa, and what will be the benefits of South Africans know the area that where the gas is being extracted, and there is no answer to that. So we are quite correct to say this is a Turkish company. And we know that in Mozambique as well, they did the same thing, and then they left once they have managed to consume gas in that part of the world. Thus now they are busy in the Indian, primarily I would say in South African coastline. They want to do the same thing. But as I said, Philip, not much of information has been coming forth from these guys. The information we had is the research that we did with a number of high institutions of learning. Like for instance, in here, we've been working with the University of Nelson Mandela Metro, which has been of assistance to us in terms of the scientific part of it. Currently, we're busy also trying to get somebody. In fact, there is somebody who is working on a document trying to translate those scientific terms into simple terms, particularly in English and isiXhosa and Afrikaans as well. Because you would know the terminology is quite vast because it's an engineering sector. So people will need to understand that in their own language so that it can sink in as well. But
Yeah.
let's go back to debate. Let's go back to your debate about renewable energy.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I'm getting you, Philip, correctly. You are saying solar, wind are not sustainable form of energy. Is what I say?
Well, I'm saying that. Yeah, basically, I'm saying exactly that, because solar energy depends upon the panels. You know, I know that the panels are becoming better in quality, but it's still panels that they need to mine a certain kind of mineral to very, very, very high quality quartz, which they need to mine. So it's a mining process to produce those panels. Of course, they produce them using a lot of energy to be able to melt coal and this quartz crystal together. So it's a very energy intensive process in the first place to produce solar panels. The second thing is that, I mean, it's not, it doesn't last forever. The good ones, and then you're talking of, you know, tens of thousands of rands. It's not the cheap panels, but the expensive panels can last for a long time. But and the batteries as well. I mean, it's the batteries that's long lasting is quite expensive, and the batteries that's not long lasting, I mean, they're not that expensive, but exactly that, they don't last that long, and then you have to replace the battery, and what do you do with the old battery, you know? And the other thing with solar, of course, why it would never really be a complete 100% solution, is that it still requires a backup, because the sun doesn't shine all the time, you know. There's times when for weeks or even months there's little sunshine, and of course then that is problematic. So you need some kind of backup. In any case, the same with wind generation. You don't have wind all the time. These huge wind generators, they cost a lot of money to produce, and in their they require magnets in their generators, in the turbines, and in the way how they generate the energy. They require magnets which are dependent on the rare earth minerals, which are mined just in a very few parts of the world, because they are so rare, you know. And at the moment there's a global kind of dominance by China, who's the biggest exporter of these rare earth minerals, which are needed in some of the components of these renewable energy solutions, you know. So yeah, I don't think it is it's the long term and permanent solution. That's why I think I sent you an email where I just referred a little bit to that, you know, nuclear as an option, but not the conventional nuclear where uranium is used as the fuel, but where it's possible to use thorium as the nuclear fuel. And the benefit of using thorium is that it can a sort of foolproof nuclear reactor can be constructed, which is kind of walk away. You know, if there's a problem, it shuts itself off automatically. Also, thorium, there's much less waste products from thorium nuclear power stations, and it's much less radioactive. So it can be realistically and safely stored for a couple of 100 years, where you know that it's going to be safe, and then it will be benign. So to me, I mean, that's an energy alternative which interests me, because I recognize that we are an energy hungry society, and I know that it has to change, but it's not going to change easy and quickly. People are not all going to be going back to living, you know, in a close harmony with nature in the near future, because it's just that we are so many people, and we are so dependent on the kind of structures which is currently set up. You know, like for example, how can everybody eat if you don't have the transportation systems and stuff that we have at the moment? You know, even on an international sort of scale, where some countries are completely dependent on trade for their survival. So if they cannot trade, they cannot eat, you know. Like we saw with this recent incident where the Suez Canal in Egypt were blocked by that Ever Given massive ship, which blocked the canal, and of course then global, how much did they say? It's just incredible, $10 billion worth of trade that passes there. 30% of the global maritime trade goes through the Suez Canal. So it was just incredible to see the impact that that had on our planet. So yeah, I don't. Firstly, of course there's space for solar power and for wind generation, you know, and for hydro and for all of these. But I think, of course, it's perfect for being decentralized. And I also admit that when you talk about something like a nuclear power station, even if you do use thorium, it's still quite a centralized thing, you know, where I like small scale decentralized. And if we can have small scale decentralized options, and maybe I'm being, you know, maybe I'm being unfair towards solar power. I think influence on me was that movie by Michael Moore, Planet of the Humans. It's available on YouTube, Planet of the Humans by Michael Moore. And that takes quite an in-depth look at exactly that, you know, how green and how sustainable is these kind of energy solutions really, you know. So back to the nuclear option, to me, I mean, it's we have to do something to cut all these greenhouse, you know, all these gases. That's all the carbon that's being emitted, global warming, and we have to. And of course, that's the good thing about nuclear is that it doesn't emit um, that kind of pollution. But of course, with the current nuclear power stations, as you know, there are lots of waste, which is the main problem. You know, radioactive waste, which is very, very, very difficult, probably almost impossible to store safely, because it remains radioactive for such a long time. And it's just interesting when you talk about uranium versus thorium. That was in the, I think back in the 40s, 50s, when they just started with nuclear power generation. That was an option to use thorium, but they didn't go for thorium because uranium, one of the byproducts is plutonium in the waste. As part of the waste stream is plutonium, and plutonium, of course, is what they use to create weapons. If you just add, I see there's somebody that wants to be added to our meeting. Who's this?
Yeah,
Lakeka
we are centralizing this discussion. You're not including other people. So he's complaining that he should be part of this.
is part of it now. Okay,
Look,
yeah. So to me, that is why you know, this fact that it cannot be weaponized. That's a major plus point for me. But of course, for the global powers that be, it's they want plutonium because I mean, and that of course is a big part of the problem. Is all these oaks that's producing so much weaponry, you know. So the French and the Americans and the British, I mean, all supposed to be peaceful and anti-war, but all exporting weapons of mass destruction, you know, making money from that trade. So yeah, no, to me, thorium, you must check it out on Google. There's some really interesting presentations on thorium nuclear power stations as an energy alternative. And I mean, I would rather see our government invest money into R&D of that kind of power generation rather than to go for, you know, continuing with coal. And when you talk about coal again, you know, most of our coal and most of our top quality coal is being exported. So it's not being
that's right.
utilized in our own country, you know. And that, of
That's
course,
right.
is also just absolutely crazy. But I just want to talk about this issue in Mozambique, in Cabo Delgado province, linked this
Maybe,
violence
maybe,
that's
be-
linked to
maybe
the
before that,
to the gas. What is your
maybe,
reflections on that?
yeah, maybe before we move to Mozambique, I think what you have raised, Philip, is quite interesting, and I hear you. You reminded me of a discussion that I've just had, I think a month ago, with the higher institution of learning, 3 of them that are based here in the Eastern Cape around agriculture. Because as a network, we've been advocating for agroecological farming as compared to commercial farming.
Exactly.
And one would say agroecological farming is more expensive than the commercial farming. But also the question arises, what is then more important? Is it our livelihood, the environment? Because I think we need to strike the balance between the two. I think one of the answers to a lot of your questions or your concerns that you have raised around nuclear, solar, wind, it's calling for what we've been calling for just energy transition. Then once that transition has been put there, and people are given space to debate and to see what form of energy would also appeal to most of South Africans, because I think you would agree to say the current form of energy that is being used in our country is not sustainable at all. And I hear you talked about the current nuclear power stations that we have or not, that are being proposed using all the toxins that are within it, and which we've been calling to say to nuclear, because even here in the Eastern Cape, Cape St. Francis, Jeffreys Bay, in a small area called Tayspan, there was a nuclear power station which were proposed by ESCOM, and I'm sure you would know that the former president have signed deal with the Russians in relation to that. And because of activism and community participation and the efforts that we've been doing to challenge that with the form of Life Africa, SARS, we took government to court and we won the case. And the court said they must go to a drawing board because they are concerned that the communities are raising around this. And research has proven around the world that nuclear, as in current form, does not assist and it's not sustainable, and it's very much toxic to human beings and to our nature as well, in particular in terms of its waste. You would know here in South Africa that the Kubek that is based in Cape Town is burying their waste in the Northern Cape. There are cells of radioactive waste that are being stored there. And I'm told that the space is shrinking. And currently, I've saw the Bantuan community that are based in Cape Town. They are busy also challenging, because ESCOM has proposed to refurbish the Kubek power station. Because you would know that that power station is over 40 years currently. So that power station is supposed to be decommissioned. And those things are not happening. Having also that, Philip, here in the Eastern Cape, when you move from Ngqeberha, which is the new name of Port Elizabeth, towards Western Cape, you will pass a town called Humansdorp, you will pass a town called Jeffreys Bay, and there is a huge wind farms that are there, which are funded by our government. I think it's 36 wind farms. Each wind farm has close to 18 wind turbines, if I'm correct. And the studies have shown in countries like Sweden that wind energy can supply energy in a sustainable form. I hear your concern of the manufacturing process and its cost to environment and its cost to humans. And I think those are the issues that need to be discussed eloquently. That is why we're calling for just transition energy, because also unions are concerned with our calls nationally, saying that let's move from from nuclear, let's move from coal, because they are thinking of their jobs,
mm.
with what is going to happen with their jobs. That is why we're saying the discussion must be widely, must be broadened to all society, so that every people who seem to be affected indirectly or directly should form part of the discussion, so that we will come to a conclusion to say which form of energy would suit us. Um, so to me,
Just before you continue, Owen, I'm just reminded of the conversation that I had with Matthew Schlabane, where I was also pushing this issue, say, hey, but we need the energy and we need, for, for our future generations. He was saying, hey, we have to change. We have to learn to live with less, even
yeah,
going, from to the point of building sustainably and building our, changing the way that we build our houses and going back to building with the earth and with the,
yeah,
that is and of course there in the Eastern Cape there's many communities and many individuals that provides a perfect example of still living in
mm,
a relative harmony with nature, but
yeah,
again I'm reminded that now we have mega cities with tens of millions of people inhabiting them, people that has lost their roots with agriculture and with being able to produce, people that doesn't even know where milk comes from, that's really become so removed from nature and from farming and from producing their own food, that it will just, and I can imagine that unless there's a major emphasis on teaching and training and changing behavior, that it will be really, really difficult for most of the globe to adapt to, kind of that living closer to the earth and living more simply and living more in your own community, because we have become so interdependent and we are a kind of a global village, and even if we as South Africa implement the best solutions and neighboring countries or even other continents and countries in other continents don't do that, then we are all still stuffed. I mean, um,
mm,
we that remains a problem. No, I think it's difficult. Issues around sustainability, and people are always sort of surprised when me as a kind of an environmental hardcore environmental activist would
mm,
say, hey, what about nuclear? But again, I must
mm,
emphasize that it is nuclear using thorium, and that's also not a process which is now, there has been nuclear power stations using thorium in the past, but it's something that's there's still problems associated with it. It's not, but we can solve those issues. We have in the past and we can again. And I just think that it mustn't be moved completely out of the mix, the same the way that I feel about, for example, charcoal and charcoal production. So on a large scale, that can be very negative and destructive. But on a small scale and in the right setting, it can be really beneficial. Like in our area, for example, where there's some bush encroachment, where grasslands are slowly being invaded by trees. So the grasslands becoming more like a savanna because of the way that people burn and climate change, better conditions for trees to grow, etc., etc. But I think mostly the way that we've fragmented the environment and the way that we don't burn the felt in the right way because of, again, timber plantations. Um, but yes, I mean, some of these issues can be overcome. I just want to, sorry, Sibusiso, I just want to talk quickly about this issue in Cabo Delgado and the gas exploration there. To me, I agree with Justica Ambiental when they say that, in fact, there shouldn't be a gas exploitation there, because that's fueling the fires. There should be a more sustainable development for all the peoples of Cabo Delgado and northern Mozambique, because at the moment it seems as if Total, they are the main beneficiaries of this project, and they will make, billions and billions and billions, but there's no there's the money doesn't get to the people on the ground, and they have to see their environment being destroyed. They have to see, same as in the Eastern Cape, fishing deteriorating, where people can't make a good living by fishing anymore because the fishes have disappeared because of this gas exploration. So you can understand why people are unhappy, So happy people are not going to allow that kind of insurgency into their environment, But if you are unhappy and you struggle to survive, then of course it becomes that's an opportunity for radical elements to come in and say, hey, but we can offer the solution. So to me, that it's such a beautiful part of our continent. And you
Mm,
spoke earlier of old Wally Mena. I was there with him because it is from that most northern port, Mochimba do Praia, which is close to the Tanzanian border, where that's the most
yes.
northern port city in Mozambique, where a lot of the timber, the raw timber from Cabo Delgado was being exported mostly to China.
Mm,
We went into some of those forests and we saw massive trees that's been logged. So you just see this massive stumps that has been left. But I'm reminded, but what I heard from Ricardo Carrere. He was the coordinator of the World Rainforest Movement based in Uruguay. He said
mm,
a deforestation is bad now when they come and they cut the forests, but it's not as bad as afforestation, where this is what we see happening over the grasslands here in Pumalanga and also there in the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, Swaziland, where people come and they plant uh, plantations. They call it forests. It's not a forest. It's an industrial timber plantation.
mm,
But with deforestation, they would come, they would log the trees. They don't take everything. They leave the smaller trees. They leave some of the diversity, and those people go again. So within 50 to 100 years, that forest has regenerated, and it seems as if there were nobody there ever.
mm,
Because all the seeds are still there. There's still biodiversity intact. But with afforestation, they come, they clear the original vegetation, subtly, because they just plant those trees, and as the trees grow, the grassland
mhm,
disappears. Um,
mhm,
and then they stay. They change the environment for a very, very long time. Like, how do you rehabilitate these timber plantations? It's not that easy.
mhm.
Yeah. Anyways, um, your reflections on Cabo Delgado and how that
Yeah,
relates to
I
the
think,
potential issues in the Eastern Cape.
yeah, that is why I said in the beginning we've been approaching potential funders to try to assist us in terms of can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. We've been trying to get some potential funders on board to ensure that we put these four countries together that are being affected by this cut power ship project so that we can find strategies of how to work together to ensure these things does not happen in areas where they have not been happening as yet, and how do we assist each other in terms of trying um, to work on projects or programs that would not to rectify, not to undo, but just as a form of intervention to say, because of this has happened to you, these are the projects that can be put forward, be installed, be interacted in order to ensure that communities that has lost their livelihood can be regain their lives back. So that is why we've been on call to say, let's recruit some potential funders and try to put Botswana, Mozambique, Namibia, and South Africa in one room, so that we can be able to discuss these things. Because by the look of things, this cat power ship project by the Italians is going to stay in Africa, and they are going to roam Africa. They are going to conquer Africa so it's better that we put some measures so that
Sibusiso, I just lost you there. Hello. Ndidi.
they don't want to come to fore to say in South Africa we're seeing these minerals and we're interested in it, and then let's speak. They are doing these deals secretively, and they are not indulging any information regarding that, because they know that communities will be able to answer some to question the process and check what would be their benefit and all that and all that. So I think an engagement between these four countries it's quite important, Philip, so that we can see a way forward. Philip? Philip?
Okay, sorry about that. I'm sorry, Owen, you disappeared there for a bit, but you came back, and I agree that you know, consultation and it's, you know, especially on a regional basis is critically important. And obviously, COVID has had quite a big impact there, because it's.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting to see how we've now do Zoom meetings, and I think it's, in a way, it's very positive, especially if you talk on an international scale. You know, I think so much money is being saved in this way. But I always found it strange to see people flying all around the world, you know, to go and attend meetings and conferences, because it really adds to your personal sort of carbon footprint, and it's something.
That's correct.
No, and it can be avoided, and now we know how to avoid it, and people have been, you know, becoming used to this kind of working together. And I'm trying to send this also to Facebook to include, you know, more people, but obviously we put it on YouTube, and then people can watch it, and it's there forever, you know, so people benefit by that, because they can learn from these discussions, as I learn also from all the people that we talk to. Um, Timber plantations. You've been involved as the Eastern Cape Environmental Network and the EJNF as well, with regards to timber plantations, their expansions, their impacts. Obviously, their impacts on communities, because they drain the water. We know how scarce water is, and you've alluded to you being on day zero with water restrictions and impacts. Currently, here in Mpumalanga, there's this issue where you know, Sapinongodwana used to pulp primarily pines to produce pulp and paper. But now their number one line now is producing cellulose. So for cellulose, they need eucalyptus fiber, and they are now converting some of their pine plantation compartments to eucalyptus plantations, and they've been doing that one on one. So they exchange, you know, if they had 10 hectares of pines, they would plant 10 hectares of eucalyptus in its space. Whereas I always understood, and that is the government's view as well, that if you have 10 hectares of pine plantations and you change to eucalyptus, you have to plant, I think, 30% less land area, so 70 or then 7 hectares of eucalyptus, to compensate for more water being used by the eucalyptus tree genus. You know that they say pine trees, they can use the equivalent of 450 millimeters annual rainfall, whereas as eucalyptus trees can use upwards of 600 millimeters annual rainfall. So equivalent, you know, so it's much more water hungry. And something about eucalyptus which have not even been properly quantified is the fact that they have very deep rooting systems, and they impact on the groundwater resource. Eucalyptus roots have been measured 60 meters into the soil profile. So that's how deep the roots can go in search of water, you know. And of course, when eucalyptus trees are harvested, they are cut, but then they coppice again, you know, they grow again from the stump. Whereas pine trees, when they are cut, you have to plant the seedling. So it takes a number of years for the pine tree to really tap into the water resource, whereas the eucalyptus tree can tap into the water resource much faster because it's already got a well-established root system on its second, third, fourth rotations, you know. So it's really got a big impact on the water resource, and we simply cannot afford to have a bigger impact on our water reserves or resources here in Mpumalanga. I mean, we are already on our knees. It's fortunate this last season we had slightly above average rainfall, but the previous couple of years were just incredible. And I mean, this little river here where we are, it almost stopped running. You know, I've never seen it as low. And of course, those conditions can return. So we mustn't plant trees that's even more water hungry, you know, or thirsty. We mustn't plant trees that's thirstier. But now they've already invested billions and billions of dollars on their expansion at the mill, and they want to plant eucalyptus, you know. So at the moment there's this court case. You go into the Geosphere Facebook page, you'll check, there's a very nice article in the Daily Maverick by Tony Carney about how the industry and the government is now in a court locked in a court battle about this issue of conversions, you know, because they insist that they can convert one-on-one, whereas the government are saying, hey, but you're licensed to use X amount of water. So now if you convert to eucalyptus, you're going to use more water that's been allocated or that you are licensed to use. And of course, that impacts on communities and residents and other farmers and other enterprises lower down the system, because mostly these timber plantations, as you know, are in the upper catchments. You know, they've got the first choice for water. And the other important issue with timber plantations, of course, is that they cannot just be simply closed. You know, like for example, with the irrigation farmers. When there's very, very little water available, the government can give directive to irrigation farmers and say, hey, sorry, you're not allowed to irrigate. You must allow water for communities, whatever, or for the ecological reserve. But you cannot do that to timber plantations. Once they're in the ground, they're going to start using water up until the time that they're being harvested, you know. But what I want to ask you is this really contentious and difficult issue of small growers, you know, because the big industry and industrial companies are going out to communities, many times, well, impoverished, but I don't really want to say impoverished, because in a way, they are not impoverished. You know, they've got their land, they've got their resources, they've got their traditions and their culture and the place to practice those, and they've got their independence and their resilience, you know. So it's not really right to call them impoverished. But then you go to those people and say, hey, man, you've got to make money. And the way to make money is by planting timber plantations. And of course, you know, many people want to, everybody wants to make money, you know. So they plant their timber plantations, small scale, maybe 5 hectares or 7 hectares, or even 10 hectares. But then they lose that land for grazing, and they lose that water, and they lose that land for planting, you know, diversified crops. So to me, I wish there was an entity that promoted really a diversified ecological way of farming. And of course, that is what what many people are involved with in any case. People do farm diversely, and they do farm in many cases ecologically sound and with indigenous knowledge systems at work. Um, but there's these opportunities, that the so-called opportunities that's being provided by big industry, and it's a way for big industry then to expand. um, and it seems to me as if they don't really take responsibility then even for the land onto which they are expanding. So, yeah, but what is your reflections on that, these outgrowing schemes, and how that's affecting rural communities in the Eastern Cape? Owen, you're still around?
Myself, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
You see, Philip, it reminded me of the meeting that we had in the Karoo. I'm sure you had that Shell um, was is initially or wanting to frack the Karoo.
Yeah,
I think it's almost a decade now. They are pushing for that, and because of community activism in that area, they have failed thus far. And we went there, calling other organizations like your Groundwork, Earth Life Cape Town, and many organizations around the Eastern Cape, South Cape Land Community, and many people, and said, let's sit down and draft a strategy. Because there is no way you can frack the Karoo having the history of water scarcity. And many people are drinking water from the bowls. You know the disaster that might happen once that place has been fracked.
yeah,
So we developed a plan to say, other than you frack the Karoo, fund projects of farming, not any farming, agroecological farming, where it won't use more water. And when you farm in an agroecological manner, you consider the environment of the area and look at what seedlings can you plant in that area that would adapt in that particular area. So what you've just said about timber plantation is the same scenario that we worked on when Shell was in high speed of wanting to frack the Karoo. So similar to what is happening in the Eastern Cape, it's very sad nowadays. If you drive from the former Transkei area, where it used to be a lot of land, there is food, and now it's there is a vast and massive food. Sorry, timber plantations that are there, and many communities have been informed, have been displaced as well. And you would know that they don't just erect timber plantations anyway. They're strategically wanting those catchment areas where there is water. They are moving communities away from that particular area. And now they're using another different strategy. They are taking members out of community to say, look, we're going to plant these timber plantations. We appoint you to cut them and transport them. So they are playing a divide and rule strategy within those communities. So it's a quite difficult issue, Philip. But we've made some strides and tried to communicate with many comrades from that particular area. And I'm saying this proudly to say they have now been aware of the issues because of the engagement we have. We've been invited from that part of the world. I believe, yeah, we're invited by Oxfam South Africa because they are working on a number of projects in that area, food gardening, small scale food gardening projects in that particular area. So we brought this issue to say, look, you've got the whole land in here, but your land has been occupied. And they're starting to ask, Uti, we are seeing these trees, and we're seeing fewer people from these communities that have contracted to cut and transport, but not the entire communities involved in the process. So we started to educate them about what are those, and now they are seeing uh, also the impacts of having timber plantations in their areas.
Yeah.
So it means that our intervention there in that particular area is also yielding results in a manner in which that will take the conversation to the other level, where they have been suggesting that they must also call their traditional leaders so that they can account, because they suspect that traditional authorities are involved in this, and um, proven seeing that in other areas that seems to be the case, because if you look into the Colombian issue, it's also the same issue. So there are a lot of them that are mushrooming in the former Transkei area, not taking into account that there are also other parts of the Eastern Cape in New Christian when you go from Queenstown, Cut, coming down in the Amatola region, which is in the Stutterham area, So they are mushrooming everywhere, day by day, So it's an issue that needs to be taken more seriously, Philip. But also, as I was indicating, that the resources also will be a bottleneck going forward.
Yeah.
And you can't say, in particular, for those people to have a meeting with them, you must sit like we're sitting now, because also there is an issue of network, which is not good in those areas. You know,
Yeah.
few of them would have smartphones. So ideally, we said, let us wait for the levels to be dropped to zero, so
Yeah.
that we can go there then and engage them physically.
Yeah.
And in that area, a telephone call would you won't do justice if you are talking
No.
with a person over phone or via Zoom. They want that contact
Yeah.
so that they can engage you.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, and
they they
that's the thing with the civil society wants to engage, whereas industry, it seems as if they don't, they don't seem that constricted, and they just continue with their master plan. The point is
mm,
that South Africa is not the right kind of region to plant trees that are very, very thirsty. So it's not
mm,
really it's not it's there's better ways of investment in the land. And I
mm,
see this mushrooming, as you call it, of timber plantations and woodlots, and because it's becoming bigger and bigger and it's got a bigger impact, I see it
mm,
as a kind of invading force, a
mm.
kind of an occupying force, because it's not that easy to eradicate. It's not that
Mm.
easy to get it away, and to once it's become more established and more entrenched, it becomes even more difficult to change
Sure.
that model. And I think people will long for the open grasslands and the indigenous forests and the water and the streams and the clear fountains that's now going to be disappearing. All around me,
Mm,
there's areas like a place called Mooifontein, beautiful fountain. But if it's a name of a plantation, it's the name of the farm and there used to
mm.
be a beautiful fountain, but now you can't find that fountain there anymore. It's dried up completely, and with it, all the potential that beautiful fountain once represented. Yeah, I mean, it makes me so sad. And I once there was a guy that I was befriended, Godfrey Silahule. He was a young man. He was a counselor here in this area, and
Mm,
he went and he did some interviews with some elderly people in
mm,
the area to in areas where timber plantations have been established, and he wanted to
mm,
find out from them also in areas of Swaziland, wanted to find out from them, how things have changed. And there was not one of them that said things are now better. I remember this one old woman who was talking about the bird songs that she misses, because there used to be plentiful birds in the indigenous forests way back then, and now it's just silent in that area. So yeah, it makes me sad now, even thinking about it now. Yeah, timber plantations is a big issue, and I think it has to be addressed. And I'm happy that you've been making strides and that you do engage on that issue. And that, I mean, I remember once we as Geosphere had hosted a meeting in collaboration with you there in Umtata.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and I saw some there's some interviews with you also on YouTube on that meeting, and also whether you mentioned him earlier, old Tabang Kuzela. Yay, I really miss him, and the wisdom that he had. I know that he was also talking of, he was always, when he came here, he was collecting seeds and, some vegetables and some nuts and some zoll and some, seeds that he could go and plant back in a diversified sort of. I remember he was very much supporting this eco village kind of
Yes,
idea.
yes, yes.
We have been talking, as we've been talking. We talked generally introduction. We talked about some of the problems as they represent and what they. And we've also been talking through this about solutions. The way that I think engagement is one of the things that you've mentioned that is important, and that you are physically involved with. You mentioned these projects of small scale food gardening and diversified
Yes.
ecological foods. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that? The solutions that you are advocating, and some of the successes that you see.
Yeah, look, there is a lot that we've done in relation to that. You would know that the Eastern Cape before 1994 um, was feeding itself. There were a lot of um, land which had food as compared to what it is currently. I think our approach is just go back to basics, just to say, in fact, one of the contributing factors for us as the network to work around that issue was because of a project or a program by government called ASGISA, which mainly communities in rural areas of the Eastern Cape were asked by government to donate land, and they would give them seeds. And these seeds, they are genetically modifying seeds. And people were grateful because they would harvest a lot of meals, a lot of maize, and but the problem was encountered when people needed to store that, and there was no market for that. Then it raised some curtains there,
Yeah.
because firstly, where they would normally store the maize, they would store the maize as normal as they would do in the olden days, not taking into account that once you store that maize, you will need to have these parasites, so to ensure that your your harvest it remains fresh as it is.
Yeah.
So the problem started when the maize in particular got rotten, almost 80% of it. And people were asking questions, what kind of maize is this?
Yeah.
And we've been assisted also by a certain doctor in a certain village. We're getting patients of having nausea, having pink eye, and all that. And this guy, out of his own interest, did a research, and he only found out the contributing factor to the sickness in those villages is that maize. So he took upon himself to test the maize, and the results came, and they confirmed it's genetically modifying. So that's when then we started then to get into that space to teach them about the impacts of genetically modified and to motivate them to go back to basis on the way they were farming in the olden days. And that's the only thing that they can really yield the results that they are desired to yield, is to go back to basics. But now, Philip, the problem is the land. The land has been intoxicated to the level that they can't do anything about it. They will need nature to take its course to rebuild its nutrients so that they can farm as they will usually do in the olden days.
Yeah.
So you will see a lot of land as if yesterday there was a fire, but there was no fire. It's because of the pesticide that has been used in that process. So yeah, but in small pieces here and there, they are starting their own food garden, exchanging seeds, doing that thing called seed banking, and which is an effort going to basics as well. So yeah, that's how, and also we've also assisted them with training of coming with new ways of agroecological farming, how
Yeah.
to make your own manure so that they can assist the soil to regain the nutrients using earthworms and all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they are getting in that space. They saw what the program which was run by government was not necessarily for them, in fact, necessary for their livelihood, but was for profit margins at the end of the day. So those are the programs that we're busy with certain partners involved also in that process.
Yeah. I
And
think
also the last projects that we had, it's a project that happened in the Buffalo City municipality where the municipality had a problem of waste. And we said, look, we can address this thing in two forms. We can address waste. Also, out of that waste, um, we can create community gardens. So we started a two-bag system where you will give householders two bags. One bag would have your recyclable material, which is the clear bag, and the green bag would have your biodegradable material, your garden leaves, grass, food waste, vegetable peels. Then we have been given a 2-hectare land near the IDZ, which is the Eastland and Industrial Development Zone, a 2-hectare land where we also did what you call compost heaps and work that land manually. Guess what?
Yeah.
The first people who came to want that veg is a retail company called Woodworth.
Yeah. Sure.
They send their organic specialists to satisfy the whole harvest, and they give certification to the extent that to say it's an organic material, so they need that.
Okay.
So but also because the program was funded by the Department of Environmental Affairs under Buffalo City Municipality. We were just appointed to develop a plan and also to assist communities and give them skills also so that they can take that project on their own. But politicians intervened in the process. But I'm not afraid to say, Philip, that project alone uh, generated a revenue in 2 years of 3.6 million rand,
Sure.
just to sell food to Woolworth and Spar.
Wow.
And also they were doing land what you call community, giving back to community.
Oh,
So they would also in every Monday and Wednesday and Fridays take stalls and sell in communities, in wheelbarrows, so that community could bear fruits of what
yeah,
they invested into in a lesser price than they would get it from the likes of Woolworth and other retailers.
yeah.
So yeah, that one was the biggest one, and we're proud to say it had succeeded. And we received an award from the National Department of Environmental as well.
Right. Sure, that's great. Yeah, it's also interesting to show how sort of diversified the growing of organic food. Which of course, if it's organic, you can get a better price for it. It comes at a premium, but of course, then it's also easier, can perish easier. So yeah, I think it's great that that project worked out well, and I'm sure that it has sprouted many entrepreneurs and a way of thinking, that hey, we can farm with food and make good money from it.
Mm, mm,
Something that I just want to mention to you that we did here recently with a small camping area and a small ablution block, two
mhm,
showers and then toilet. But to warm the water, because it's in an isolated area, there's no electricity there.
mm,
So this year, when there was some people that I think there were about 40 or 50 people that were using the camping site, and what
mhm,
we did to provide the hot water was to build a compost heap. They call it the Howard method, where you
mm.
layer the compost, your green material, your grass clippings, and your vegetable matter and stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
quite a thick layer, and then a thinner layer of manure,
Mm,
cow manure, any manure, chicken manure, any manure that you can
mm,
have,
mm.
and then a thin layer of soil. And you just repeat that process. But
Yeah,
what we did was, whilst we were building the compost heap, we put a hose pipe at
just
20
to get
millimeters.
rid of the methane.
No, 20 millimeter hose pipe that we coiled up inside the compost heap as we were building it higher and higher, because ultimately
Mm,
it was about
mm,
meter and a
mm.
half high. And we
Yes.
used about 60 meters of hose pipe. With
Mm.
that method of compost building, the compost becomes incredibly hot. Within two,
Yeah,
2 days, it's hot at 65 degrees Celsius. Hot, you cannot
yeah.
keep your hand in there. So of course, then we put cold water in from the one side of the hose pipe, and the other side we tap hot water. So we used for the showers, we used hot
Mm,
water from
mm,
the
mm.
compost heap. Um,
Yeah,
I was so surprised, because for about a month, that water was staying so hot that you had to put cold water with it when you showered. You
yeah,
couldn't just
yeah.
stand under that
Things like
hot
that.
water.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then for another 2-3 weeks, it was still hot, and that you can find a nice shower. So I thought, yay, this is such a good way for communities to produce warm water. Because for a month, and it's a couple of hours of work to build the compost heap. Um, and once it's there, it can give you hot water for a month and a half. And then the byproduct, of course, is good quality compost, which you can
Mm,
use in and of course, you just keep that system going. So I was really
mm,
impressed with how that functions, because
mm,
I was really surprised by. I knew that it was going to work, but I didn't know that it will work as well as it did. So
mm,
that's something that definitely we will do. We also did a workshop with the Pumalanga Water Caucus December, and Lovu came here, and we did a work.
mm,
We actually built our own hot water device there. But the people, they
mm,
came on the Friday, and of course it takes a day or two to warm up. So by the Sunday, the water was piping hot, but then they
mm,
already had to leave. But I know that you have a big day tomorrow, so I want to thank you very, very much for your time. And I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that we can have a conversation like this maybe again in the future. Maybe we can have a panel, maybe yourself, December and Glovu, uh, you know, uh, yeah, we could get a couple of people together on a panel to discuss specific issues, because I do find that, whilst we have this opportunity of using this platform, we must use
Mhm.
it, because it does. And as we get better at using it, I'm not sure even if it live streamed to Facebook now. I don't think it. I think there was something that I missed, but it is possible. And then,
Mm,
of course, you can reach more people with your thoughts and ideas. And I think
mm,
it's
mm,
something that we as activists must use now that we are restricted in our movement.
mm,
And to me, generally, I think that it is, that it is one of those things that we should adopt, as civil society activists or environmental activists, to say, if it's possible to meet virtually, where it's much cheaper and much more beneficial for the environment, then
mm,
of course it is necessary sometimes to meet face to face. It is necessary, and sometimes much more and productive, of course, if you can see. But then it must really be necessary to meet. It must be.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, unless if you want any closing comments from your side.
Um, Philip, I just want to say thanks for the opportunity, and I hope our discussion today will assist other people, will touch other people, and be able to convince them otherwise. And I don't see why we don't have a bigger discussion around issues, in particular in the issue of energy. I think that's one space that we need to engage more on it so that we can get some different views from other people.
Yeah.
And I'm with you 100% to say let's keep on using the space. Yeah,
Yeah.
COVID has taught us something new,
Yeah.
and why not? And
Exactly.
it would be good to touch base with our comrade or December. It's been quite some time, and
Yes. Yeah.
with their level of capacity in issues relating to environmental justice, it will be more meaningful and fruitful to get them on board and other comrades that will assist going forward. I think that discussion should continue, and just let's structure it in the manner in which it will be conducive for everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you, Philip. Yeah, I will share some photos tomorrow
Okay,
from
great. And we can
our
do.
protest, and some videos.
Okay.
Yeah, so that we know what are we up to. Thanks
And,
very much, Philip.
and I will send you the link. I will put this video up on YouTube and send you the link, so that you can watch
Okay.
it. And
I'm having another
yeah,
meeting.
also thanks. It
All
was really nice to meet up with you again, and
right.
it was nice also to remember some of our colleagues, like old Wally Menno, who you mentioned, and No, and Tabang,
I
of
think
course.
I think Philip, we also owe them, uh, Walimena and Tabang Mozela. They've done a great job,
Uh,
And for us, if we remain stagnant, it means that we're betraying our own comrades.
yeah,
So
you are right.
by suggesting that let us broaden the platform, it will assist going forward so that their spirit may rest in peace.
Yeah,
Honestly,
yeah. We
so
mustn't we mustn't disappoint them. Hey,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So that is why I'm
Hey,
100% with you saying that let's
okay,
put in the scope and bring other people on board. Thanks very much. I
sure.
need to leave. At quarter to, I've got another meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Hey, and have a nice, yeah, a
Oh,
good
thanks.
evening to you. Thanks, Owen.
So bye.
Cheers.